Yes, today we're getting into the Hunger Games. I am so excited. This is actually my first time revisiting this series. I genuinely forgot just how good the Hunger Games is. I was also so surprised by the overwhelming amount of food references that are being thrown around, especially in the book. For instance, Panem, the dystopian country that this story takes place in, is Latin for bread. Miss Collins most likely got the name from Panem et Circenses, which means bread and games, a Roman phrase that refers to superficial, extravagant entertainment given to the public in order to keep them distracted and under control. And that basically sums up the Hunger Games premise. The country is divided into the ruling capital, known for its eccentric Met Gala type fashion, and districts, ranked from 1 to 12, so from richest to poorest. Each year, the capital picks 2 kids from each district and makes them fight to the death. Last one standing wins. The fact that this whole thing is then also turned into a reality show is beyond wild. There's so many references one could draw to current modern day reality TV culture, which I'm so guilty of enjoying as well. Alright, enough essay talk for now. Let's get started with our first meal.
What are you gonna do with that when you kill it?
Damn you, Gale! It's not funny.
Early on in the story, Katniss and Gale are having breakfast in the woods. It's the day of the reaping, so the day that the tributes, the kids, for the games are being picked.
Oh, I forgot. Here.
Oh my god. Is this real?
Yeah, better be. Cost me a squirrel. Happy Hunger Games.
And may the odds be ever in your favor.
So in the movie, it's a breakfast bun that the two of them share. In the book, however, their breakfast is a bit more elaborate. Look what I shot! Gale holds up a loaf of bread with an arrow stuck in it, and I laugh. It's real bakery bread, not the flat, dense loaves we make from our grain rations. The bread that I bought, it's actually called the Hunter's Bread. I sadly did not have an arrow available to stick in it. They also share a little goat cheese wrapped in basil. I went for this soft little Mediterranean style cheese. It's not goat, it's based on almonds and cashews, and it's really good. Wrapping this in basil was not easy. I would have loved a tutorial here, so then I just ended up carefully sticking the leaves onto the cheese. Lastly, they also have blackberries. This has to be foreshadowing, especially because, those berries at the end, they're a huge, giant symbol of defiance, and the berries here at the beginning, those are actually picked from illegal grounds. Like, those two are not supposed to be hanging out in those woods, and so even just this little picnic is an act of rebellion in and of itself. The bread that Gale bought for Katniss is ironically from the bakery that Peeta's family owns. Peeta is our second biggest character. He's bread boy, Katniss' sidekick. I also saw him being described as Katniss' dramatic trophy hubby. All this man wants to do is to paint and decorate cakes, and I fully support that. I could have, of course, baked a loaf of slightly burnt bread here, but then again, the thought of baking Peeta-Bread was way funnier to me.
Oh my god, Peeta! Peeta! Oh my god, Peeta.
To a large mixing bowl, add the hot boiling water, followed by some sugar, and mix until dissolved. Then pour in some cold water, sprinkle the yeast on top. Lastly, mix in a half a cup of the flour, feeding the yeast with that. Cover and set that aside for 10 to 15 minutes, someplace warm. Right now, it is the summertime for me, so any place in my home is a warm place. In the meantime, in a separate bowl, combine the remaining flour and the salt. Now the yeast mix should be nice and frothy. Add Add the dry ingredients and mix everything with a wooden spoon until it roughly comes together. Then add the olive oil and continue mixing. Transfer everything to your surface now and knead for about 8 minutes using your hands. Now oil a mixing bowl, place the dough inside, cover it up, and let it rest again somewhere warm for about an hour. Once you're ready to assemble the breads, lightly grease a baking sheet with oil and preheat the oven to 250 degrees Celsius. The dough grew so nicely here, oh my god. Give the dough another quick knead and then cut it in half. Set one half aside for now. Cut this half into 4 pieces and using a rolling pin, roll each one into a flat disc, around 12 centimeters in diameter, but you also don't have to be super precise here, says the girl with the measuring tape. These 4 go onto the baking sheet now. Let them bake for 4 to 5 minutes or until golden brown. If you're lucky, some will puff up completely, like this one. I haven't figured out why some of them won't do that yet, but it's okay, they were all really yummy. On to this next scene.
200 miles per hour and you can barely feel a thing. I think it's one of the wonderful things about this opportunity, that even though you're here and even though it's just for a little while, you get to enjoy all of this.
We're on the train, making our way to the capital. This must be the first time Katniss and Peeta are both face to face with all the opulence and excess that the capital people indulge in all the time. This especially comes through in the book with countless food descriptions. The supper comes in courses: a thick carrot soup, green salad, lamb chops and mashed potatoes, cheese and fruit, a chocolate cake. Throughout the meal, Effie Trinket keeps reminding us to save space because there's more to come, but I'm stuffing myself because I've never had food like this. So good and so much. I especially love this next bit where Effie praises Katniss and Peeta for knowing how to use knife and fork, as opposed to the previous year's tributes. The fact that those tributes ate everything with their hands, like a couple of savages, she states, upset her digestion. Katniss then responds to this comment by choosing to eat the rest of her meal with her fingers. Now, I wanted to create my own version of this treat display that we briefly see in the movie. After fixing himself another drink, Haymitch grabs one of these little cakes here. They look like they're filled with berries and almonds. First, I preheated the oven to 180 degrees Celsius and thoroughly greased 9 muffin molds with some vegan butter. Then, in a large mixing bowl, I combined all the wet ingredients. That would be applesauce, vanilla, oat milk. I ended up adding a bit of wine as well because Haymitch, but you could also totally just go with milk. I also added some melted vegan butter here, some vinegar, and sugar. In a separate bowl, I combined the flour, the baking powder, a bit of salt. I added the dry to the wet. And last but not least, quickly folded in some chopped strawberries and some almond slivers. I divided everything between the greased muffin molds and then let these bake for about 25 minutes. They are quite domey still, some of them, but I'm just hoping that these are gonna sink. If not, I'm just gonna flatten them with like a cup or something so that they look more like the ones in the movie. but it should be good. I'm just gonna let them sit and do their thing for like 30 minutes. And that is it for the muffins. The wine and the strawberries kind of make these taste like fruit punch, which is interesting. I bet Hamish would love. In a later scene, Effie mentions chocolate-covered strawberries, and so I thought those could be a good addition here as well. If you don't want to eat the green part of the berries, then make sure to cut those off beforehand. I forgot to do that, but then I also didn't care. It's good to eat. I let them rest on a plate with parchment paper. In the meantime, I lifted my muffins out of the tray and then finished off my display here with a packet of these vegan marshmallows. They definitely fit the very abundant, over-the-top, capital vibe. I also tried my best to recreate the fruit platter that's shown in the clip. I didn't have any blueberries or cherries, but I went with my leftover blackberries instead. Oh, and I also added some of these yellow fruits that I don't think I'd ever tried before. During their time on the train, there is a moment in the book where Katniss tries hot chocolate for the first time. "They call it hot chocolate," says Peeta. "It's good. I take a sip of the hot, sweet, creamy liquid, and a shudder runs through me. Even though the rest of the meal beckons, I ignore it until I've drained my cup. Regular hot chocolate doesn't cut it here, I feel. And so I made this one, inspired by French hot chocolate. Basically, to a small saucepan, you add dark chocolate chips, salt, and then some milk of choice. You bring this up to a simmer, and then lower the heat to medium-low, mixing frequently until the chocolate is fully melted and some of the milk has reduced. Okay, so this next meal, it's Katniss's favorite thing about the capital. This cozy stew with dried plums and wild rice. As a reward for appeasing the audience, Katniss gets a basket full of goodies from sponsors, which includes this stew amongst other things. I'm actually so upset that I don't have a sponsor for this video. Just imagine the segue right here. I obviously did not use actual lamb. Although it may look like it, it is seitan based. It tastes like Christmas, and it's actually fairly easy to put together. The seitan is loosely based on the vegan steak recipe from my cookbook. In a large mixing bowl, I placed all the wet ingredients, mixing those thoroughly before adding Vital Wheat gluten powder. Then I mix that up for about 8 to 10 minutes. I then cut the slab of seitan into bite-sized pieces, pan frying the seitan chunks first in a little bit of oil for about 5 minutes, and then I removed all of that and added a bit of vegan butter to the same pot, followed by a chopped onion. I know I also added some carrots here, but I would recommend you to add your chopped carrots later. Do not add the carrot just yet. It will just get too soft otherwise. Meanwhile, chop up the garlic until fine. Then add the garlic to the pot together with some sugar, some soy sauce, and tomato puree. Let that cook for another 1 to 2 minutes before pouring in the red wine and the vegetable broth. Also add some bay leaves and the cooked seitan, which I know I did burn a little. Let this simmer over medium to medium high for about 30 minutes, like actually have this bubbling. Once you reach the 15 to 20 minute mark, you can add some chopped dried plums and the chopped carrots, letting those cook for another 10 to 12 minutes. Also add spices and salt, and during the last 5 minutes, add a cornstarch slurry to thicken up everything. Here I'm mixing in some fresh chives, and that is it. Feel free to serve this with some wild rice and or some more of the flatbread. I also had this plant-based cheese here on display, as well as some apples. apples, they also get to have their moment in the film. I know I say this in almost every video, but I also mean it every time. This next recipe might be my favorite thing that I've ever made. An iced cake that I created in honor of Peeta's baking and camouflage skills.
Oh my God, Peeta! Peeta!
Hey.
I love this little interaction in the book here as well. In a large mixing bowl, I'm combining all the wet ingredients first. Non-dairy milk, sugar, applesauce, vanilla, vinegar, and oil. In a separate bowl, I'm mixing the dry ingredients. That would be flour, salt, and baking powder. Then I'm combining the wet and the dry, making sure to not overmix. Now set aside about 1/4 of the cake batter, which translates to 3 to 4 heaping tablespoons. To this small portion, you're going to add some green food coloring. The remaining vanilla batter, I'm dividing equally between the other 3 cake molds, and then I just let that bake for about 20 to 25 minutes. I let the baked cakes cool completely. I actually ended up finishing this whole cake the following day. So the next morning, I made some buttercream frosting, whipping up some room temperature cubed vegan butter first until light and fluffy. Then adding the powdered sugar in 3 to 4 stages. Seasoning the buttercream with some vanilla and a generous pinch of salt. Next up, I filled the cakes and did the first crumb coat. I decided to add some frozen, or at this point, slightly defrosted blueberries to the filling. Then I took the remaining frosting and removed about 3 heaping tablespoons, putting that into the fridge also. And now the final frosting leftovers I turned into this rock color using lots of black and blue food coloring. So I covered the cake in 2 layers of gray. Oh, remember this bit of frosting that we had set aside earlier? I took this and then divided that into 2. One half I turned into a light blue and the other one I kept white. Those 2 colors are helping to create this really nice rock texture using a completely new sponge. It's kind of the same motion that you would make with a beauty blender. Again, I did 2 rounds. As the cakes were resting, I took out my green cakes from earlier, remember those, and I turned them into crumbles. Here's, I guess, where thicker, more freshly baked cake would have probably been better. Anyway, the fake moss goes on to the bottom of the cake, very messily. But yeah, this was the last recipe for today. There's so many more food moments in this franchise. I could have talked for hours. To sum things up, in true school presentation fashion, because this video really turned into one, I feel like, food really is one of the major themes of this story, if not the biggest one. Because the books are written from Katniss's point of view, we know that she's thinking about food, about starvation, about hunger all the time. This section of the book here made me think a lot and spiral a little bit, and so I thought I'd share it with you guys. What must it be like, I wonder, to live in a world where food appears at the press of a button? How would I spend the hours I now commit to combing the woods for sustenance if it were so easy to come by? What do they do all day, these people in the capital, besides decorating their bodies and waiting around for a new shipment of tributes to roll in and die for their entertainment? And on that light note, I'm gonna leave you guys for today. Class is dismissed. Definitely let me know in the comments all of your thoughts and opinions. Also, I would love to know, what would your method in the Hunger Games be? I think I would probably run and hide and cry and go take the Peeta approach. Although I don't even think I can run that well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you had fun, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye!
Told me all the things that she loves.